Great case study keynote session with a wide range of examples of just how valuable integration has become to cloud POCs or even live projects. And now we turn to the drill down portion of CloudCon integration, where our expert presenters take us on some more detail about the opportunities they see for the cloud. And for this session, I'm happy to be rejoined by SOA Software CTO Alistair Farquharson. Alistair, welcome back.
Good to be back.
At SOA Software, Alistair Farquharson spearheads product design and development and helps enterprise customers leverage SOA Cloud and their own applications APIs for ongoing business benefit. He is an expert in custom application development and distributed environments that can achieve scalable architectures and extend business value. Prior to SOA Software, Alistair worked at US Interactive, where he was a key advisor to CTOs on many companies regarding their internet architecture issues. He brings this vast experience to us today in the session that he's put together called How APIs Can and Will Change Your Business. In this session, Alistair will explain just how the cloud is playing a crucial role in helping companies uncover the valuable new resource called APIs through a lifecycle strategy. In this innovative session, we'll learn how to plan, build, run, promote, and support APIs, and how a well-managed API program can attract enthusiastic developer community that will maximize the impact on your customers and your profits. Just a quick reminder, you can download Alistair's slides by clicking the download slide button at the right, and we love your questions, so simply type them as they pop into your head into the submit a question box. And now, Alistair, tell us about how APIs can and will change your business.
Thank you, Vance. So I'm going to be talking about APIs and how they can change the game for your company. I'm going to start off repeating a little bit of what I said in the keynote presentation by introducing the concept of APIs and framing it appropriately. And then I'm going to drill down into the life cycle around an API and how that affects your existing business practices, and talk about the kinds of capabilities you're going to need if you're looking to expose an API and support a developer community for that API. First of all, what are APIs? Well, APIs are essentially business capabilities exposed over the internet for applications to use. These applications may be mobile devices, they might be plugins into other people's websites, they may be partner applications. Either way, they are consuming a set of business capabilities that you're exposing to the internet. Why would organizations make use of APIs, or why would they expose APIs? Well, first of all, the top of the list, of course, is to make money. Organizations like eBay get a lot of transactional volume and a lot of revenue from their API. And this is because the APIs serve as an aggregator of transaction volume from a myriad of different sources. So organizations or partners of eBay are building applications on top of eBay. They are using eBay as a platform and using their APIs as a way of getting access to that platform. So companies or individuals can go ahead and build applications, innovative new applications that eBay couldn't themselves think of, and build them against those APIs and drive revenue for eBay. Other organizations are saving money. There are plenty of use cases out there and plenty of examples of how organizations are saving money using Amazon's web services. You can also build brand. APIs are very effective in providing an open platform or opening up your organization so that developers can build new and cool functions and features and applications on top of your core business value. If you look at something like Google Maps, it's become a platform where people can put anything on a Google map, embed it into their site, and come up with really interesting functionality and new tools that use mapping as a basis for a whole set of applications. Organizations like Salesforce have become very, very successful. In fact, 50% of their transactions are coming through their API. I come across organizations all the time that have embedded Salesforce's processes into their own internal processes. And they've done that, they've saved money, they've become more agile, and they've been able to deliver new products to the market faster. If you look at the API growth over the past 3 years, it's really becoming exponential. If you look at the sheer number of APIs that are coming out and the new APIs that are coming to market and the number of transactions per API, all of these indicators show that the APIs and the API growth is continuing to advance. It reminds me a little bit of when websites started becoming popular. At first, nobody could figure out why they would ever put out a website. Since then, it's become commonplace. In fact, organizations that have not moved to the web have been driven out of business, and companies that have not done it successfully have not done as well. Some organizations focus purely on the website and have actually closed down their brick-and-mortar presence. So a website has really become a very, very legitimate channel for a business. And I believe that APIs will themselves become a very effective channel and a requirement to do business over the course of the next few years. If you look at API traffic between Salesforce and Twitter, you're looking at really large numbers of transactions coming through their API. And this really reflects the kind of business that these organizations are becoming. They're becoming a service provider. If you think of streaming video companies that initially started off delivering physical media, they've become online web streamers just purely by accident, purely by the fact that their APIs become so successful. If you look at Twitter, more often than not, customers are using applications built on top of Twitter rather than Twitter directly. Salesforce, the same. Organizations and companies are embedding that CRM functionality into the existing web portals and front ends that they have today. Companies and users especially are not necessarily interacting directly with Salesforce. So it's become a very important part of the revenue generation and the business model for these organizations. Where did APIs come from? Well, if you look at the old world before the internet, companies reached their customers using traditional mechanisms, the phone, traditional snail mail, advertising, yellow pages, etc. And then what happened is the web came along, and these same companies started investing in websites. They started building websites, they started marketing just themselves, and then they started doing commerce on top of those websites. And many organizations that did not make that move are no longer around. Then what happened is mobile devices started becoming more capable. So cell phone and mobile internet usage started to rise, and companies saw this as a potential avenue and started building add-ons to their website that made their websites and their capabilities on that website more friendly for mobile devices. A smaller footprint, a lighter weight front end, and this was met with somewhat limited success. Now with the advent of iPhones and Android devices and others, there's a great appeal and a great push to building homegrown native applications on those devices, simply because the user experience is so much richer than you can get from a standard website or a website ported to a mobile device. Companies have started building their own apps to provide these rich experiences. If you think about any airline today, they will have an app that you can go download and install on your iPhone. And what's essentially happening in the background is that app that runs on that device is calling an API that that organization has provided for that particular app. So how can we extend that concept a little bit? The idea is if building your own app helps reach your own consumers, then surely building a developer community around that API will allow that developer community to build a whole new set of apps that you don't have to build yourselves. And in turn, those apps that you're not paying for, that you're not managing, that you're not responsible for, is now reaching a whole set of consumers that you as an organization can't reach directly. So what an API really does is it helps aggregate and it helps concentrate all of these new consumers into a channel that is relatively inexpensive compared to one that you have to deliver, build, manage, maintain, and support yourselves. The basic idea is that building, managing, and maintaining an API is much, much easier than building, managing, and maintaining an app or even thousands of apps that could be leveraging that API directly. So you get a huge effect in terms of efficiency and time to market and a much lower cost of operating that infrastructure to attract that set of consumers. You're also going to find that these people are building applications that are reaching consumers that perhaps you could never reach yourself because they're not in your target market, they're not in your geography, they're not directly supported by you, they don't like you. Whatever the case might be, you're reaching a set of consumers that you wouldn't necessarily be able to reach yourself. So this is a very powerful concept, and it allows you to get a multiple factor on your development efforts internally. To throw some numbers against the wall, if you think about spending 80% of your money to reach 20% of your customers, you can think about then spending 20% of your money to reach 80% of a consumer market you haven't addressed yet. So what makes a good API? Let's talk a little bit about best practices and a set of capabilities that you're going to have to build as an organization. If you look at the life cycle of an API, or let's think briefly about the life cycle of an application internal to your organization. You have to plan that application effectively. You then have to build that application, and then you have to operate that application. Beyond that, you don't really have to think about how you're going to actually share that application to your user community. You might have to train some people, but at the end of the day, it's a captive audience. You don't have to go out and market an internal application. But you do have to go out and market a website. You do have to go out and market an API. So if you look at the best practices as they relate to APIs, starting with planning, you need to build well-defined and correctly scoped APIs. During the planning phases, you really need to think about what makes a good API and what of your business functions are defensible in the market, which ones deliver clear business value, which ones are going to make you the most money, and you're going to have to plan it in such a way that it's very well defined and scoped. So you're going to potentially come up with a set of APIs that will meet the needs of your market. You might have to prioritize one API above another, and you might have to plan a lot of additional activities, legal activities, marketing activities, branding activities that synchronized with the release of that particular API. Then you'll go and you'll build the API. And on top of anything else, an API has to be very well documented. It has to be well documented, it needs to be atomic, and it needs to be as simple as you can possibly get it. You also need to provide toolkits and SDKs and whatnot for that API, things that you may not necessarily have done for an internal application or an internal API. You're going to have to think about the usability of the documentation and how it might appeal to an end user. Then you need to operate or run that API. It needs to be secure, robust, and managed. It needs to reflect the quality of service and the standards of service that your organization displays or presents to the outside world. So that API needs to be available, and it needs to be secure, and it needs to be well managed for that set of consumers. If your API goes down, or you release a new API that's not backward compatible, or you drastically change your API from one release to another, you're going to end up alienating a community of developers. So you really need to think about how you're going to build your API, give it potentially some more forethought than you would to an API that you're exposing internally. So the last stage of the life cycle is around sharing. So how can an organization expose a set of services to the outside world? How can they market them? And how can they support them with a community of developers? The kinds of capabilities that they need here is to provide community forums, to be able to federate with other organizations, to be able to optimize for search, to be able to develop and share expertise on the site, and to be able to collaborate or to allow developers of applications to collaborate with each other. So taking a slightly higher view of the life cycle, I like to divide it into two different stages. The first stage is API management, which deals with the traditional operational management of your API. How do you actually release the API to the outside world, and how do you operate it in an efficient and secure manner? The other aspect of it is developer community management. And this is around how do you actually share that API with the outside world, and how do you provision access to that API from a set of applications. So let's look at API management first. The discipline of API management is all around protecting your APIs and helping to ensure that they're performant. The kinds of capabilities that you need are things like security, monitoring, provisioning, and quality of service management. You need to be able to protect the APIs from abuse and ensure the privacy of customer data, particularly for mobile devices. Mobile devices have a very unique set of requirements and capabilities around security. It's likely that as an organization, you may not have experience exposing APIs to mobile devices. You may not understand necessarily the security mechanisms that the mobile devices are capable of and the performance constraints that they have. So you need to be careful about using the correct security mechanisms and still maintaining the privacy of your customer data and protecting your APIs from any kind of abuse. You also need to be able to provide integrated testing and debugging capabilities. Developers want to be able to come to your site, to your organization, and test out your API, play with it a little bit, see what's going wrong if something does go wrong. You need to be able to provide a very performant and scalable API with things like paging and caching that I mentioned in my case study during the keynote session. These are valuable capabilities that allow you to maintain a quality of service around your API for your developers. You need to be able to expose RESTful APIs with both XML and JSON content types. There's also other newer standards coming out and are picking up a lot of traction for mobile devices. So these are standards and specifications and transport types and messaging mechanisms that your organization may not be familiar with. So when you're looking at rolling out an API, you may need a set of capabilities that can provide mobile device-friendly and API-friendly technologies and messaging protocols. You also need to be able to integrate your development activities with your internal design and development infrastructure. So if you already have an SDLC and you already have development teams that are working on your back-end functionality, you have to figure out how APIs are going to actually affect those developer teams. You're going to need to figure out how you're going to manage change to your API. You're going to need to figure out how to manage quality of service and scaling of that API and how that affects your internal teams. You also want to be able to protect those internal applications with service levels and quality of service management capabilities like SLA management and quota management. You want to make sure that no particular application abuses a back-end system. You want to be able to limit the number of transactions or the bandwidth that any particular application consumes. You also need to be able to monitor and manage traffic from individual apps. And you want to be able to provide that monitoring data back to your developer community. The idea here is that you want to be able to expose your APIs in an intelligent way, in a reliable way, and in a transparent way. So developers should be able to come to your site. They should be able to play with your API. They should be able to see what's happening. They should be able to get a consistent quality of service. They should understand what constraints and quotas they have, and they should be able to monitor and manage how you as an organization are performing. If a developer has confidence in the APIs that you're providing, they will continue to use them, and they will lower the support burden on you as an organization. So let's look at the other aspects around developer community management. Developer community management is about attracting, managing, and supporting those developers that are building applications. You want to create a network of peers. So you want the developers to feel like they're part of a community. Similar to an open source model, there's a community of developers that are contributing to the community, that are actively writing code, submitting it back, and they get a lot of respect and a lot of positive effect of contributing to that community. You want to create that same environment around APIs. You want to allow those application developers to collaborate with each other. It doesn't matter if they're saying unpleasant things about your API. At least they are talking about your API, and you can effect some kind of a correction. And you can maybe incorporate their feedback into the next versions of your API. So you're continually improving it while maintaining transparency and openness in your developer environment. And this really appeals to the average developer out there. You want to create an innovation engine where developers are building applications and they can collaborate around these applications and innovate around the building of these applications. You also want to create a model of social contribution where developers feel that they can contribute to the community and get recognized for that contribution. So if you look at the capabilities of your API portal, so to speak, you're looking at things like social interaction. How does it integrate with existing mechanisms that these developers are using? How do you create forums that these developers can participate in? How do you create a support mechanism whereby developers can submit tickets? And how do you create collaboration where these developers can create groups and teams to build applications and to create common groups of interest around APIs that you're providing? So to drill down a little bit further into these various capabilities, you really want to provide support mechanism, forums, and collaboration within some kind of a threaded discussion group mechanism within your developer portal. You want to integrate with other social sites and social media, so Facebook plugins, Twitter feeds. People should be able to like and follow things within your developer community. You want to allow your developers to rate and review your APIs and each other's applications. You want to integrate with the popular search engines out there. You want to allow developers to create groups and teams and collaborate around the building of various things within those groups and teams. You want to be able to provide documentation for the API that's searchable and indexable and easy to find and easy to use. You want to be able to create a place where people can download sample code and SDKs. And you also need to be able to integrate the app and API lifecycle management and provisioning. So if a developer logs onto the site and they want to use an API, it should be obvious how they can actually gain access to that API, and the credentialing mechanisms and the workflow activities that need to take place are simple and transparent and easy to use. You also want the community, the portal, to be able to send out notifications and track end users and notify them when an API is going to be down or when an API is deprecated or you have something new and exciting in the works. So the community and the portal that these developers are using needs to provide all of these capabilities, which essentially provides you as an organization with a channel for those APIs and a way to market those APIs. So what now? Remember the 4 stages of the life cycle. You need to plan effectively to build the right API in the first place. You then need to build it correctly using the right standards, make sure it's well documented, and provide tools and SDKs for your developers. You then need to make sure that it's operating correctly. It needs to be robust. It needs to protect your internal applications, and it needs to provide a transparent quality of service and service level to your developers. Your developers also need to have visibility into the performance of both their applications and the APIs that their applications are using. And then you need to figure out a way of sharing that API. How do you promote it and market it? How do you manage the support activities? How do you communicate with your developer community? And how do you leverage social mechanisms to exponentially grow the size of your developer community? At the end of the day, that's how success is going to be measured. How big and how active is that developer community? If there's no one in your developer community, no one's using your APIs, and you're not going to attract anybody else. When a user's out there and they're looking for an API to use, they're going to gauge you on the strength of your community, the activities within your community, the readability of your documentation, and how well your API actually performs. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'll hand it back to Vance.
Alistair, thanks again for a conversation that I think merits interesting technology thinking, but also interesting business model thinking. Really very fascinating. Thanks a lot.
No problem.
With your permission, as you might expect, there are quite a number of questions out here, and in the time remaining, let's see if we can tackle a few of them.
Okay.
Just to level set on this whole theme in cloud integration, that API management and extending the visibility and value of your business is really kind of in the same theme. Let me just ask this question. Do you see API management as an emerging force multiplier for cloud integration and also, in fact, cloud-enabled integration?
Yes, I do. I think the key words there is that it's a force multiplier. I think that has 2 effects. The first one is it's aggregating or it's providing a channel for the business. It's much, much easier for the business to manage an API than it is for them to build those applications themselves. The second one is you're attracting a community of people that have a vested interest in marketing and selling their application. So even the promotion and the marketing of an application or set of capabilities is no longer in the organization's hands. So if they can effectively expose an API, they're going to lower their costs of supporting and managing and building the applications, because they don't have to build them or support them directly. And they also lower their costs of promoting and marketing those applications. So I think that there's a twofold effect here. I think that on one side you're saving money, and on the other side you're making money. And that's good news in anyone's business.
Absolutely. Here's kind of a technical question just to make sure that we're all speaking from the same definition of APIs. We use SOAP or web services to expose our applications, and if contemplating REST, is that the same as what you refer to as APIs? If not, what is the difference?
I think it depends on who your consumer is. SOAP web services certainly have a place in the world. That place is probably not with mobile devices. What mobile devices need is they need a lighter weight protocol. They need a RESTful style of interaction, simply because the tools and the capabilities of the device gear it towards that particular technology set. So an organization that's exposing SOAP services needs to be careful about who they're marketing to and who the end user is for that SOAP service. SOAP is good because it's well-defined and it's machine-readable in terms of a definition language, but it's not very good for application developers. It's much, much easier for an app developer to create a client that uses a REST API with the JSON content than it is for a developer to create a client against a SOAP API. So you just need to think about the kinds of people you're addressing and your target audience.
In fact, here's a kind of a follow-up question just to that idea of a profile, so to speak, of API use. The question here says, what types of customers are SOA software helping build and promote APIs, and is the interest largely fueled by mobile integration?
Yes, the interest is definitely driven by mobile app development. There are some other use cases. There are web integration use cases. Some organizations are distributing JavaScript libraries for embedding into websites for a variety of different capabilities, or scriptlets to embed a particular customer's capabilities into somebody else's website. And these all fall within the loose definition of APIs. But I think you're right. I think that the majority of traffic and the majority of interest is being driven by mobile devices, and specifically native applications running on top of those mobile devices. What we are seeing, though, is we are seeing a resurgence both in the B2B space as well as even internally for these sets of capabilities that I've described. So an organization who has a very large and active partner community, that's as good as exposing APIs to the public. Some organizations are very large, and the majority of their business comes through their partners. So they have APIs. Those APIs may be SOAP APIs, but we don't care. The same set of capabilities still apply. So organizations are starting to think about APIs as a channel. They're starting to look at mobile devices, and they're starting to look at how they can bring these new community and social capabilities into the more traditional B2B space or even the internal development spaces. APIs are about making money, and that really helps focus the organization around an end result, a measurable return on investment.
One other question here, Alistair, about your expertise and also how you're making it available to customers. Just to be clear, does SOA software offer best practices, templates, or a pre-engineered cloud for this API management solution?
Yes, we actually do. We're helping quite a few customers to actually define their API correctly and build the correct tooling and support organization around exposing the API. We also recently announced the availability of API management and community management in the cloud as a software as a service offering. So organizations can both install this internally, or they can make use of our cloud offering, or there are even hybrid models between the two, depending on the legal and political climate within the organization that is exposing those APIs.
And this is your Atmosphere product line, just to be clear, correct? And that now you've got a cloud flavor of that same basic core technology.
Exactly right.
Great. Alistair, this has been a great conversation about the idea of API management and the extension of the SOA software offerings of Atmosphere, both for on-premise and cloud. We're going to leave some links up here for folks that might need more information about the inside workings of Atmosphere, as well as product information and other use cases that you've got. Really terrific conversation.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Alistair Farquharson, CTO of SOA Software, it's been a pleasure to have you, and thanks especially for taking so many questions.